Hi guys, finally it's happening. Left-wing voices are getting a proper airing on the BBC. So Zack Polanski, the current deputy leader of the Green Party and candidate for leader, appeared on the Laura Kuenssberg show where he talked about two issues important to him and the left of politics: a wealth tax and Gaza. Now, Kuenssberg started out by suggesting that the new government is in a difficult spot economically and that's why they're making cuts to public services. And Zack was challenged over the idea that if you tax rich people more in order to fund the government, they will just leave. Polanski dismissed this out of hand, which is right, but could he have pointed out something more obvious? Anyway, at the end of the day, will this interview help boost the Greens?
Zack, do you have any sympathy for the position that the government is in? I mean, they did take over at a time when the economy had been being battered because of Ukraine and because of COVID. Public services have had a hard time for a long time. When you look at what they're doing and the sort of straitjacket they're in, do you have any sympathy for them?
No, I don't think it's easy, but I think it's very simple. We actually need to tax wealth and not work. And you asked Angela Rayner several times at that beginning of the interview, will you tax wealthy people more? And she gave you some very small measures that are tinkering at the edges. Actually, if we put a wealth tax on assets of 1%, we could be raising billions of pounds.
Leave? So you earn less money because all the wealthy leave.
Well, so it's actually a myth. There's a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, who are a group of...
Okay. He's right here to point out about the patriotic millionaires. There are people, there's an organization of millionaires who want to be taxed more, who want changes to the tax system so that the richest in society pay more. Now, I wish he would have pushed back on this idea of people leaving. He even said it. It's a tax on assets. The assets can't be moved. You can't move land out offshore. And when it comes to certain assets, if you want to liquefy them and transfer the money to other jurisdictions, you can have an exit tax on that. So I hope that what the Green Party are going to do going forward is not just focus on a wealth tax alone, but, for example, a land tax, or to focus also on an exit tax. So, because you're going to hear these arguments trotted out time after time. Well, what about people leaving? Well, once again, the people can leave, but their assets remain. The assets will be taxed, not so much the individuals, because somebody could be making a huge amount of money living in Monaco, but if their asset is in the UK, that asset can be taxed. Yes, you are going to lose a bit of money when these people leave. They're not going to be buying their Rolls Royces or spending money in Michelin star restaurants. But the money you recoup, because you're taxing the wealth, the asset, should benefit that, should benefit society. These are people who have benefited from a society that funds public health care, that funds education, all of these things. So these people have benefited from a society that's based on taxation. Now they don't want to contribute anymore because they're rich. There's nothing to stop them from staying in the country and paying their taxes. They don't want to do that. I've said before, rich people don't like paying taxes, and they certainly don't like their taxes going to fund poor people. So they're willing to leave the country, take a hit in order to avoid that. It's a ridiculous approach. But what you need to have is not just a wealth tax, but you have to have it broken down into other ways. For example, a land tax and an exit tax.
Wealthy individuals who are saying taxes more, because actually no matter how rich you are, we all benefit from a more equal society.
There's quite a lot of
Wonderful. An equal society. Nigel Farage rambles on about fairness. He's saying, oh, well, what about people coming into the country illegally? It's unfair. So this idea of fairness is really important. And I think the Greens should tap into that as well. How is it fair that there are people who have huge amounts of money and they're not paying their taxes, while there are ordinary people struggling to get by who are paying their taxes, who can't avoid these things, who can't afford, expensive accountants or expensive lawyers or expensive experts who can help them avoid paying taxes? That's not a fair society.
Evidence, though, that many very wealthy people have left the country. If you talk to anyone in the city, that's what they would tell you. And people who put forward...
Yes, the people have left, but the assets have remained. Laura Kuenssberg, does she not understand that, or is she just there to push some sort of point?
suggestions of wealth taxes, when those things have been brought in before, they often don't deliver anything like what you might hope.
Well, I'd refute that evidence, but I'd say more fundamentally, if people don't want to spend money in tax to our public services, then are they really contributing to our country? I'd say more widely.
Once again, yes. Are they contributing? Is it fair? It's not fair. So I think the Green Party should tap into this fairness more than they are at the moment.
Widely on your question too, Angela Rayner talked about a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. I describe it as a genocide. And when we have a government that are ultimately complicit, in fact, actively participating by arming them, I think when the public watch interviews like that, it just feels completely disconnected from material reality. And that's both on domestic affairs, but also international affairs too. And I think both interviews are an example of why people are rejecting the two old parties, because they're seeing politicians say things that just materially aren't reality.
Is it?
Yes, I think he's tapping into something like what Nigel Farage is doing. Farage is tapping into this idea that, both mainstream parties, the Conservatives and Labour, are not listening to ordinary people. And the Green Party is doing the same. And the Greens have been benefiting from that. We're seeing more and more support leave Labour to the Greens than to Reform UK, which is ironic because recently the government has been focusing on immigration to try and dampen down support for reform. That's not working. So if you are actually going to pander, it makes more sense to pander to the Liberal Democrats and to the Greens than to Nigel Farage. So I think a way that Farage has been so successful is by manipulating the media, by using the media to push his narrative. And if the Greens want to succeed, they have to do that. So it's great that he's on Laura Kuenssberg's show, getting an airing, but he needs more of this. The Greens need to be a little bit more controversial. They need to be a bit more aggressive, I think, in order to get those likes and clicks, because at the end of the day, that's what the media seem to care about, more than policies or more than anything else. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.